For 3 Christmases, my family left me out, like I was invisible. Their messages full of excuses, never an invite. This year, still, I didn't wait. I bought a luxury beach house, something they'll never understand. As I stand on the balcony, the ocean breeze cutting through the silence, I feel a calmness settle. While my phone buzzes with their half-hearted attempts to reconnect, I realize they lost me long ago. This Christmas, I'm not waiting for them anymore. I built my own family, my own space, and it's perfect. All right, before we dive into this crazy story, do me a favor. Subscribe and tell us where you're watching from. Joanne sat in her worn leather chair by the window, the soft winter light filtering through the blinds, casting long shadows across the room. Her fingers hovered over the screen of her phone, the blue glow illuminating her face, pale and steady. The cold winds outside cut through the trees, their skeletal branches scratching at the window as if demanding attention. She opened the latest post from Claire, one of those festive, glossy family photos. Matching pajamas, the Kessler family arranged like a picture-perfect tableau, all smiles, surrounded by the warmth of the Christmas tree. Joanne studied the image, the forced cheer in their expressions, and, as always, the glaring absence of her name. No mention, not a word. Her thumb lingered over the screen, searching the tiny captions for the familiar refrain. "So glad we could all be together this year," or "Family is what you make of it." But it wasn't there. No mom, no grandma, not even a "wish you were here." She flicked the phone shut with a sharp motion, the sound more of a snap than a click. It wasn't just the exclusion that stung, it was the deliberate silence, the coldness in the way they simply moved on. Olivia's name flashed up next, a message from the girl she loved, though she couldn't say it aloud anymore. "I miss you, Grandma." A brief text, as always. Few words. But Joanne could hear the hesitation in the message, the absence of the follow-up she had hoped for. No call. No invitation. No "let's come together." Just a line of text on a glowing screen, colder than the wind howling outside. The phone slipped from her hand, landing softly on the armrest. Joanne closed her eyes, feeling the bitterness settle like a weight inside her chest. A knock on the door broke her reverie. Esther. Joanne didn't even need to ask. She could always tell when her best friend was close. That sense of purpose, the firm steps, the knowing silence. Esther entered, holding 2 mugs of cocoa, steam swirling up like a delicate, fragile reminder of warmth. She didn't speak immediately, just sat down beside Joanne, handing her a mug. Joanne accepted it wordlessly, fingers curling around the warmth of the cup, but her gaze remained fixed on the window. Esther's sharp eyes flicked over the phone on the table. She didn't need to ask to know what had happened. Her face softened with a trace of sympathy, but there was something else there too. A knowing glance, a spark of something much more practical. "You've been holding it in," Esther said, her voice low but firm. She set her mug down and unfolded a piece of paper from her bag, a printout of some numbers, some projections. "Your balance is higher than your bitterness," she said with a slight grin, though it didn't quite meet her eyes. "Let's use it." Joanne's gaze shifted to the paper, but it didn't really register. The words blurred for a moment as her mind tried to connect them to something she hadn't allowed herself to think about yet. Esther leaned forward, eyes sharp, businesslike. "You don't have to keep letting them write this story for you. Not anymore." Joanne's pulse quickened. She knew exactly what Esther meant. It was time. The folder sat on the coffee table between them, a plain manila file marked with a black marker. Plan B, Legacy Edition. Joanne hadn't opened it in months, had tucked it away behind other things. Past hurt, old memories, safer stories. But now, The time had come to face what had been quietly growing in the corners of her life. She reached for the folder, the paper crinkling softly as she pulled it toward her. Inside, the weight of the plan felt heavy, filled with the kind of cold precision Joanne had learned to master. Each page was a map, a blueprint for something new, something solid, and perhaps something unrecognizable to her family. She opened the folder, flipping through the contents. There were sketches of a house, notes, timelines, and something else. A list, a guest list. She glanced at it. 7 names. None of them blood. She shut the folder with a soft snap. The decision was made. It had been made a long time ago. Her phone buzzed again, this time a message from Tomas. "Can you meet me at the Cape?" Joanne set the phone down without replying. There was no need. The message was more than an invitation, it was confirmation. Tomas knew her, perhaps better than anyone else, and she knew it was time to act. The Cape would be ready soon. The house she had claimed, the space she had rebuilt, would soon be waiting for the life she had been planning for years. But before she could fully lose herself in the thought, her eyes caught a new notification from Claire. Another story, another passive-aggressive display. This time it read, "Chosen family, toxic traditions." Joanne's finger hovered over the screen. A chill ran through her. She couldn't help herself. She took a screenshot, saved it, tucked it away like a quiet secret. The irony wasn't lost on her. Joanne leaned back into the chair, letting the cocoa warm her from the inside out. A slow smile tugged at her lips. One of those smiles that didn't reach the eyes but stayed firmly in place. She wasn't angry anymore. She was something else entirely. And this year, she wouldn't be left out. Joanne stood at the edge of the property, the ocean wind stinging her face, but she didn't flinch. The sand beneath her boots was cold and shifting, as though it too had once been something else. Something made and remade over time. She looked at the house, or what was left of it. The peeling paint, the sagging roof, the splintered wood. It had once been a dream, long abandoned, but now it was hers. Thomas stood beside her, hands in his pockets, surveying the ruin with a critical eye. His face, always serious, was etched with the thought of work to come. He was the one who had helped her see beyond the decay, the one who had believed before she did. "We can make this sing," Tomas said, his voice thick with resolve. He pulled a set of blueprints from the folder tucked under his arm and unfolded them, revealing the plans, the foundation for what this place could become. Joanne leaned over the plans, her gaze flicking across the detailed sketches. Every line, every note, each corner had already been imagined. She could see it now. High ceilings, wide windows framing the horizon, beams of light spilling across the floor. This would be her sanctuary. "There's nothing to fix here," she muttered, but Tomas didn't blink. He knew exactly what she meant. This wasn't just about rebuilding walls. It was about rebuilding herself. "This," Thomas said, tapping the blueprint, "is about ownership. Not just of property, but of everything that's been stolen from you." The wind whipped through the ruins as he spoke, a low hum, the sound of something old being stripped away. Joanne's lips curled into a smile, a small but unmistakable shift. She had already begun to feel it, the weight of what she was about to claim, what she had been claiming for weeks. Across the yard, the old fireplace stood stubbornly in the center of the house, darkened and charred with age, but it was still there. Joanne walked toward it, running a hand along the cold stone. The crackling warmth of a fire had never been something she had been offered. But this was hers to craft. She knelt down and ran her fingers over the stones, feeling the past, the cold winters, the disconnection. And then she stood, her gaze firm. "This will be North Star," she said quietly. "It's the place that will always point me in the right direction." Thomas paused, nodding, understanding. A beacon. A beacon. Yes, that was exactly it. Later, Esther arrived, her sharp heels tapping on the cold stone path. She stepped into the living room, taking in the room that would soon be more, would soon be the symbol of everything Joanne had fought to hold on to. She didn't waste time with pleasantries. Instead, she handed Joanne a financial statement, a sheet of numbers that didn't scare her, not anymore. I rerouted some of the retirement funds, Esther said, matter of fact, to make this happen. It's an asset now, not a retreat. Joanne stared at the numbers, and for a moment, the weight of the decision hit her. But it wasn't fear she felt. It was power. She took a breath. Let's make it permanent. Esther's eyes gleamed. Done. By the time Joanne turned her attention back to the house, it felt like a different place entirely. Every detail was taking shape. Tomas would be there soon, laying the first beams, replanting the foundation. The life she'd dreamed about, the life that had always seemed just beyond her grasp, was already coming into being. Her phone buzzed, breaking her focus. It was David. We're in Aspen this year. You'll be okay, right? Her thumb hovered over the screen. The message felt distant, impersonal, like an echo of something that no longer mattered. She could feel the old hurt, that familiar ache of abandonment. But it was already fading, melting into something more resolute. Joanne set the phone down and walked out onto the porch. She didn't need David's validation. She didn't need to ask permission anymore. She was building something that couldn't be taken from her, no matter how far away they went, no matter how many Christmases they spent somewhere else. From the deck, she could see the ocean stretching endlessly before her. It was cold, but the waves didn't care. The sky hung heavy, but there was a raw beauty in it, a sense of possibility. This year, she wouldn't be waiting for an invite. She wouldn't be looking for validation. She would be the one people would seek out, the one who made the rules. The house would stand, the North Star would shine, and the world would have no choice but to notice. And when they came to her, and they would come, she would be ready. The house was alive now, pulsing with warmth, energy, and the flicker of new beginnings. Outside, the sharp winter wind howled, but inside, it was calm, almost peaceful. Joanne stood in the entryway, her eyes scanning the room as she adjusted the last stocking on the mantel. Each one was different, each stitch carefully placed, the colors vibrant against the pale stone walls. Her fingers had worked tirelessly to create them, a small personal touch for the family she had chosen. Esther had arrived first, as always. The two of them had started the tradition long ago, sharing a cup of tea and swapping stories in the quiet hours before the house filled. But now, as Joanne slipped the last stocking into place, there was something different in the air. A quiet satisfaction, the feeling that this was where she was meant to be, surrounded by those who chose her rather than the other way around. The house wasn't finished yet, not by a long shot. But the fireplace was glowing, its soft orange light flickering across the room. Tomas was outside, securing lights on the porch, the first touch of brightness on the exterior. A sense of calm settled into Joanne's bones as she admired the space. It wasn't perfect yet, but it was theirs. Hers, Esther's, Thomas's, and soon, the others she had carefully invited. Esther came in, carrying a tray of drinks. She set it down on the table and caught Joanne's eye, her expression soft but knowing. "You did this," she said, not a question, but a statement. Joanne smiled faintly. "I did." The doorbell rang, cutting through the quiet. The first to arrive was the widow from next door, Mrs. Reynolds, whose house had burned down the year before. She smiled shyly as she stepped inside, a basket of homemade bread in hand. Behind her were two former students, A pair of young women Joanne had taught years ago, each one now grown, successful, but still finding time to connect with their old teacher. They had been Joanne's students, but now they felt more like family. Joanne greeted each one with a quiet, steady smile, ushering them into the warmth of the house. She could already feel the difference. This wasn't a forced reunion. It wasn't the hollow feeling of a family reunion where obligations lingered unspoken. These were people who wanted to be here. These were people who understood. Everyone gathered around the fire, talking in soft tones, the clink of glasses, the rustle of plates filling the air. The room felt full, but it was the kind of fullness that filled the heart, not the kind that left you feeling drained. There was no tension here, no cold shoulders, just a gentle hum of laughter and easy conversation. Tomas and Joanne were outside later that evening, hanging lights on the porch together. He held the ladder steady as she climbed, placing each bulb carefully along the railing. For the first time in what felt like forever, Joanne laughed, a full, genuine sound that echoed across the yard. She hadn't realized how much she had missed it, how much she had missed her, until now. Tomas caught her eye and raised an eyebrow. A silent question. "Nothing," Joanne said with a shrug, grinning. It's just nice to be here, with people who see me. All of me." Thomas didn't respond immediately, but she saw the quiet understanding in his eyes. He didn't need to say anything. He was here because he chose to be. He always had. Inside, Esther had arranged for a catered coastal dinner. Nothing traditional. No turkey, no stuffing. Just fresh, simple dishes that celebrated the region's bounty. The table was laid with care, the centerpiece a bowl of fruit, a touch of greenery, and flickering candles that threw soft shadows against the walls. Joanne posted a photo on her social media, a soft, glowing image of the fire, the table set for dinner, and her guests, laughing and talking in the background. Her fingers hovered over the screen as she typed a simple caption, "Found family." She didn't need to explain further. The image spoke for itself. When she set her phone down, a new notification popped up. Claire had seen the post. She texted David immediately. "Did you know she was there?" Joanne stared at the message, a small smile playing at the corners of her lips. The question wasn't about what was said. It was about what wasn't. The absence of mention. The silence. The distance they had chosen. The space that had always existed between them. But now, Joanne didn't feel the sting. She felt the freedom. She turned away from the phone and back to the room, the laughter still spilling from her friends. This was her life now. Her family, chosen carefully and loved fiercely. And whatever Claire thought, whatever David said, Joanne didn't need their validation anymore. She had built this, from the ground up. The tree, the stockings, the laughter. It was all hers. For the first time in a long time, Joanne was exactly where she was supposed to be. And as the evening stretched on, she knew there was no going back. The scent of fresh pine and salt lingered in the air as Joanne sat at the antique desk, her hand steady as she signed her name once again. The ink from the pen smeared slightly, a gentle reminder of the weight she carried now. The room was quiet, save for the crackling fire and the soft hum of the ocean beyond the window. Joanne had been here before, signing documents, feeling the cold steel of obligation, the cold distance between her and everything she once wanted. But this was different. This was final. The decision, irrevocable. She placed the pen down and leaned back in her chair, her eyes resting on the two documents before her. The will, her legacy. David and Claire's names were gone, erased. In their place, she had carefully written the names of those who had chosen her, those who saw her. Olivia would inherit 40% of the estate. The rest would be devoted to a coastal education fund, a tribute to the life she was now living, far away from the life she once thought she'd have. Your signature here, Esther said from the doorway, her voice steady and grounded. She held out a file, the document ready for Joanne's approval. Joanne didn't hesitate. She signed. Done, Esther said, smiling tightly. This is permanent. There's no going back. Joanne nodded. A weight lifted, but it wasn't the kind of relief she expected. It was a strange calm, a quiet peace. She could feel the weight of the past being unwound, strand by strand, until it was nothing but a distant memory. The house, the trust, the future. It was all hers now. She sat in silence for a long moment before reaching for another document. A large, leather-bound journal. It was blank for the most part, save for the meticulous notes she had begun to make. She opened to the last few pages. The journal was supposed to be an annual tradition, a place to reflect on the year past, to write letters to her family. But the last 3 years? Empty. She didn't need to write about them. Not yet. Not while the wound was still raw. The pages were left empty, and in that, they spoke volumes. Tomas walked in with a soft thud of boots against the hardwood floor, holding a framed blueprint. The old house design. It had been a vision once. Their vision, hers and David's, and then discarded. Now, the frame was empty, but next to it, the deed to the beach house rested, secured, and signed, a firm marker of ownership. He set the frame on the desk, his gaze lingering on it for a moment. You've built more than just a house here, he said quietly, his voice rough but sincere. Joanne smiled faintly. It's a home. A home. Yes. That was exactly what it was. She picked up her phone as it buzzed again, breaking the silence. Olivia's name flashed across the screen. Are you mad? Joanne's thumb hovered over the keys, but her response came quickly, without hesitation. No, I'm building. She hit send before she could second-guess herself. There was a brief moment of uncertainty as she waited for Olivia's reply, but nothing came. Joanne sat back, taking in the room once more. The finality of it, the stillness, felt like the calm before something major, something big. She wasn't waiting anymore. She wasn't wondering if they would come. She had built her life, her space, and it was enough. Her phone buzzed again, this time a notification from Claire's mother. Joanne had posted a picture earlier, a simple one of her sitting by the fire, the room aglow with the warmth of the Christmas tree. Claire's mother, in an accident of some kind, had liked the post. Joanne stared at the notification, not surprised by the passive-aggressive gesture. She knew what was coming next, and it came quickly. Claire blocked her. It was the final thread in a tapestry that had long unraveled. Joanne set her phone down, a small, almost imperceptible smile crossing her face. She didn't feel the usual anger, the rush of emotion. She felt clarity and strength. Thomas, who had been watching her, noticed the shift in her demeanor. You're at peace, he said. Joanne's gaze softened as she nodded. I am. Outside, the wind had picked up, rattling the windows, but inside the house was warm, anchored, and calm. The echoes of a family who hadn't wanted her were fading away. The family who had chosen her, who had seen her, they were the ones who remained. For the first time in years, Joanne was no longer playing the role she had been assigned. She was the architect of her own life, and this was just the beginning. She could see it clearly now, the future, unbroken, standing tall in front of her. And when they came, and they would come, she would be ready. But tonight, for the first time, she was not waiting for them. She was waiting for nothing. She was already home. The room was filled with warmth, not just from the fire but from the light that seemed to emanate from the people gathered around the table. The air was rich with the scent of rosemary and thyme, the hum of conversation, and the clink of glasses. Joanne stood at the edge of the dining room, the soft glow of the holiday lights illuminating the faces of her guests. Her hand hovered over her phone, the screen flashing with an incoming message. But she ignored it, focusing instead on the scene before her. Esther was talking with Mrs. Reynolds, her laughter carrying easily across the room. Tomas was in a quiet conversation with two of Joanne's former students, sharing stories of the past. And Olivia, sitting quietly at the edge of the room, seemed content in the stillness. It was all so effortless, so natural. No forced smiles, no tension. Joanne lifted her phone again, stepping back to snap a picture. The camera caught the light perfectly, the warmth of the room, the joy on their faces. The ocean beyond the windows sparkled in the fading light of the day. When they stop setting a place for you, you make your own table. She typed the caption with a slow, deliberate motion, her fingers steady as she shared the image to her feed. It wasn't just a photograph. It was a declaration. She wasn't waiting for anyone to come back. She had made her own place, her own family, and in that, she was whole. Joanne hit send, and then she waited. The phone buzzed. David. She stared at the screen for a long moment, the words, first time in months, ringing in her mind like an echo from the past. He'd never called her before, not when it mattered, not when she was waiting, not when she was hurting. She let it ring. The phone buzzed again and a message from Claire popped up. This feels manipulative. Joanne's lips curled into a small, humorless smile. Manipulative. That word. She almost felt sorry for Claire, the kind of projection that always came from someone who couldn't see past their own blind spots. It didn't sting anymore, it just made the distance feel clearer. Esther, noticing the shift in Joanne's expression, raised an eyebrow. Coming from her, that's projection with pearls, she said, her voice laced with a wry amusement. Joanne nodded, her gaze steady. She wasn't angry. She wasn't even sad. She was just beyond it. Beyond their games, beyond their versions of family. She had a new family now, and they would never be left out again. Olivia's name flashed across the phone screen next, and Joanne didn't hesitate. Olivia had liked the post. A quiet confirmation. Then, a moment later, Olivia shared it to her story. Joanne felt something shift in her chest, but it wasn't what she expected. It wasn't relief. It wasn't joy. It was something deeper, something that spoke of quiet understanding between them. Olivia had made her choice, and she wasn't alone anymore. Her phone buzzed again. David had left a voicemail. We should talk about next year. Joanne listened to the message, her fingers slowly tracing the edge of her phone. The words weren't an invitation. They weren't even an apology. They were just words. The kind of words that tried to slide back into her life, as though nothing had changed, as though she hadn't built a life in the absence of their absence. She didn't call back. Instead, Joanne turned her attention back to the table, back to the life she had chosen. The warmth of the fire, the gentle hum of conversation, the steady rhythm of her own breathing. This was where she belonged now. The past, with all its broken promises and abandoned spaces, was already fading into the distance. David's voicemail? It didn't matter anymore. Claire's message? It didn't matter either. Joanne had built something more lasting than any of them could ever understand, and no one, not even them, could take it away. The front doorbell rang, sharp and unexpected, pulling Joanne out of her quiet reverie. Her hand hovered above the glass of wine in front of her, the deep red swirling slightly with the movement of the air. It had been a peaceful evening, the fire crackling in the hearth, laughter still echoing faintly from the dinner table, when the knock shattered the calm. She moved toward the door, her footsteps soft on the polished floor, but the moment she opened it, The unease she'd been trying to push away resurfaced. There, on the doorstep, was a large box. The kind of box you'd expect from a luxury retailer. The kind of gift she never wanted. The kind of gift they sent. David and Claire. The card attached was simple, written in Claire's neat script, "Let's reconnect." Joanne stared at it for a long moment. The thought of their words, the ones they'd left behind, suddenly felt suffocating. This gift, with its fine wine and gourmet basket, wasn't a bridge. It was a weight. A desperate attempt to smooth over years of distance with trinkets, as if they could buy their way back in. As if they could pretend everything was fine. Her lips pressed together into a tight, controlled line. She took the box inside, setting it down on the counter with an audible clink. Her fingers traced the edge of the package. For a fleeting moment she thought about opening it, about seeing if it could be something different this time. But she knew better. There was no more waiting for them to change. No more hoping they would finally see her. Joanne fetched a marker from the drawer, scribbling a note on the top of the box, her handwriting sharp, deliberate. Return to sender, address not emotionally found. She felt no satisfaction in it, no anger either. It was just fact, a statement of her new reality. Without saying a word, she handed the box to Esther, who had been watching from the doorway, a knowing look on her face. She'd seen Joanne go through the motions before, the quiet hope, the desperate yearning. And she'd seen Joanne now, after all of it. This time, there was no hesitation. "I'll mail it back," Esther said, her tone soft but firm. "With delivery confirmation." Joanne nodded, watching her friend leave, the box in hand, heading toward the mailbox. There was something cathartic in the act, something that made her feel lighter. As though she had let go of the last tether that had held her in place. Later that evening, Tomas entered the room with a fresh can of paint in his hand, the color a rich ocean blue. "The guest room's ready for a final touch," he said with a small smile, setting down the paint and the tools. He had been the one who'd worked on the house with her, alongside Esther, bringing her plans to life. The guest room now had that same warmth the rest of the house held, with soft blue tones that mirrored the sea beyond the windows. He set to work quickly, his strokes methodical, steady. As the color spread across the walls, he hung the framed quote above the bed, the one Joanne had found months before, hidden in a tiny, forgotten shop by the sea. "Joy doesn't beg for inclusion." Joanne watched him for a moment, a quiet smile playing at her lips. There was something about Tomas's presence that made everything feel anchored, solid, as if, despite everything she'd been through, she had found a place, a real place, where she was not just allowed, but celebrated. Later that night, as they shared a drink in the living room, Joanne's phone buzzed again. It was Olivia. "Why are you doing all this?" Joanne looked at the message, the words carrying the weight of curiosity, of something deeper. It wasn't just a question, it was a reaching out, a wondering. Her thumb hovered over the screen as she composed her response. "Because I'm finally allowed to." She sent it without a second thought. It was true. She had been waiting for permission, for validation from people who couldn't, or wouldn't, give it. But now, there was no waiting. She had made the choice. And she had made the space for herself, the room for the people who truly mattered. The next morning, a quiet knock at the door pulled her out of her thoughts. Tomas opened it. Another box. A second luxury gift. This one, untouched. Left on the porch. The message from David, no doubt. Joanne didn't have to look at it to know. They had tried again, sending the gift without even waiting for her response to the first. The notion that they could just keep pushing things, offering her scraps, as if the distance between them could be bridged with material things, hit her like a cold wave. She didn't bother to open the second box. It wasn't theirs to give. Not anymore. Her gaze lingered for a moment on the untouched box before she turned, leaving it on the porch. It wasn't a rejection, not really. It was a quiet assertion. She had built something that was hers now, built from scratch, from people who chose her. And that was enough. For the first time in years, Joanne felt no need to look back. There was nothing left for her in their world, only in the one she had made. The night air was crisp, tinged with the faint scent of salt from the ocean just beyond the property. Joanne stood on the deck, the sparkler in her hand crackling with light, its shimmering glow casting a brief but beautiful radiance across her face. Around her, the laughter of her chosen family filled the air, easy and unburdened, a chorus of joy that had no need for pretense. For the first time in years, the weight of the past felt light, like it had been blown away with the flickering sparkles, leaving only the present. Tomas was beside her, his laughter rising above the others as Esther, still a little too polite for the chaos of joy, raised her glass in a quiet toast. Joanne clicked her phone open, snapping a picture as she held the sparkler out toward the sky, her face illuminated by its soft light. The photo was a snapshot of everything she had built, this moment, this life, full of warmth, laughter, and real connection. She posted it, the caption almost writing itself. Reclaimed holidays, redefined joy. The words felt right. It wasn't just about her. It was about the people around her, the people who had made the choice to be there, to sit at the table she'd created. This photo, this moment, was theirs. It was a testament to the life she had woven from the ashes of her past. Within hours, the photo was shared across social media. The light from the sparklers refracted in so many ways that it felt like the picture was shining beyond just the small corner of her life. A coastal lifestyle blog picked it up almost immediately, using it as an example of finding joy in the most unexpected places. Joanne couldn't help but feel a sense of irony, knowing that, for so long, she'd been expected to find joy in places that didn't even want her. But here, this was where she belonged. This was the joy she had claimed, and no one could take it away. Her phone buzzed with notifications, and as expected, Claire's cousin tagged her under the post. The comment was short, almost dismissive. "I guess this is her new family now?" Joanne read the words with a quiet smile. It wasn't the first time she had been judged, not by a long shot. But this time, the sting didn't land. She was used to being an outsider in their eyes. What was new now was that she didn't mind. In fact, she welcomed it. The phone buzzed again. This time, it was David. A strange, unfamiliar sensation stirred in her chest when she saw it. He had unliked every previous picture of her, every trace of their family erased from his feed. It was a move that felt cold, almost clinical, as though he were cleaning the slate of her existence. It would have stung a few years ago, but not now. Not after everything she'd done to untangle herself from the expectations and the silence. Tomas, who had been busy carving a design into the deck railing, looked up as Joanne walked over to him, her phone still in hand. He'd been working on a small private project of his own, something for her, something that had nothing to do with the house. His hands were stained with the wood's dark grain as he turned to her. "Joe's light," he said, stepping back to admire the words he'd carved. The letters were simple but beautiful, the grooves deep enough that they would be visible for years to come. Joanne smiled, her hand gently brushing the words. "I love it," she whispered, a soft warmth spreading through her chest. Tomas didn't say much, but his quiet gestures spoke volumes. This was his way of showing that he saw her, too. Later that evening, Esther quietly updated Joanne's digital estate. The documents were already signed, but this was something more subtle. A final, irreversible touch. Claire and David were locked out of access to her accounts, her finances, her future. They no longer had a place in her world. Joanne didn't feel vindicated. She felt free. Olivia messaged again, her tone tentative, searching. "You seem happy." Joanne looked at the screen for a moment, the words unfolding in front of her. There was no bitterness, no confusion in Olivia's message. It was simple, honest. A question that needed no explanation. Exactly. Joanne's fingers tapped the keys, the word ringing with clarity. Exactly. This was what happiness looked like. Not in the old traditions, not in the holidays she had been left out of, not in the place she had spent years hoping to fit into. It was in this space, with these people, and with this life she had carved for herself. And for the first time, she didn't need anyone else's validation. She didn't need the scraps they offered. She was whole. Outside, the firelight flickered as the last of the sparklers burned out, but it didn't matter. Joanne had everything she needed. And as the night deepened, she knew that no matter what came next, nothing could take this from her. The light she had built was her own. It would always burn bright. The sun had just begun to dip below the horizon, casting a warm golden glow over the beach. The house, still smelling faintly of fresh paint and new wood, stood as a monument to Joanne's vision. A home, not just in the physical sense, but in a deeper, more profound way. Every detail, every corner of the house spoke of her journey, from the overgrown, abandoned property to the sanctuary she had created. The wide windows now framed sweeping views of the ocean, the soft glow of dusk playing across the waves. The heated floors were warm beneath her feet, the soft hum of the house filling her senses. It was done. It was finally theirs. She stood in the living room, her hand brushing over the mantelpiece where a small wooden sign now sat, simple but powerful. "For every year they forgot, I remembered myself." The words seemed to resonate in the room, echoing across the walls. She read them quietly, almost as if they were a declaration of her own reclamation. For so long she had bent herself around the needs and expectations of others. But here, in this space, there were no demands, no unspoken obligations. She had made this. And it spoke louder than any invitation, louder than any apology. The phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. Joanne glanced over and the screen flashed with Claire's name. It was a strange feeling, this distance from them. She had spent so many years, so many Christmases, wishing for them to see her, to invite her back into their world. But now, she couldn't remember the last time she'd truly felt the weight of that desire. The person who had wanted to be seen, to be included, was no longer standing in the doorway. She picked up the phone, her finger hovering over the green call button. The house, her sanctuary, felt like an echo of everything she had given up. The family, the invitation, the space in their lives, all of it was gone now. She tapped the screen with a soft final movement, and the call was sent to voicemail. The phone buzzed again. This time it was an email from David. "We didn't think you cared about the holidays." The words were blunt, sterile. The underlying message was clear. They were still trying to understand her absence, still trying to force her back into their narrative. They couldn't comprehend why she had stopped waiting for an invitation, stopped looking for validation from them. Joanne sat down, the weight of his message sinking in like a stone, but only for a moment. She opened her gallery of photos, scrolling through the images from the last few months. Her favorite beach views, quiet dinners with Tomas, moments she had never shared before. She chose one. It was simple. A shot of the sun setting over the water, no one in the frame but her and the horizon. She tapped the photo, sending it as her reply, her message unspoken but clear. "This is where I am. This is where I belong." Her finger hovered for a moment before she hit send. The photo was a final gesture. It was her piece, her statement without words. No more explanation. No more trying to make them understand. As she set the phone down, there was a knock at the door. Joanne's heart skipped a beat. A strange, unfamiliar flutter. She wasn't expecting anyone. Slowly, she moved toward the door, pausing for a brief moment, as though unsure who was on the other side. When she opened it, standing there was Olivia, her face soft and serious, as though she had been standing there for much longer than just a moment. Her eyes met Joanne's with quiet understanding, as though the distance between them had been bridged in the time it had taken Joanne to build this life. Joanne's breath caught. For all the isolation, for all the space she had created, Olivia was here, and that was enough. Without a word, Olivia stepped inside, the warmth of the house enveloping her as Joanne closed the door behind her. The quiet between them wasn't uncomfortable, it was something more familiar now. There was no need for explanations, no need for apologies. They simply were. Together in this place, with no one else but the family they had chosen. Joanne didn't say anything. She didn't need to. She simply turned and led Olivia into the living room, where the fire crackled softly in the hearth. The house was theirs now, and as the soft glow of the evening faded into the stillness, Joanne realized something. This was the beginning of something new. The past no longer had any hold on her, and neither did the people who had failed to see her. What mattered now was this: the peace, the space, the love they had created. And as the evening stretched on, Joanne knew that no matter what came next, she would never need an invitation again. The home she had built would speak louder than any words ever could. The morning light filtered through the wide windows of the beach house, casting soft golden rays across the polished wooden floors. The scent of fresh coffee filled the kitchen, blending with the salty tang of the sea that drifted in through the open door. Joanne moved slowly, her movements practiced and deliberate, the kind of quiet rhythm she had grown accustomed to. She had always made breakfast with purpose, finding peace in the simple acts: cracking eggs, stirring the batter, the heat of the pan against her skin. It was grounding, calming. It was something she had always done for herself, even when she hadn't fully believed she deserved it. But today, there was a quiet weight to the morning, something that felt different. Olivia stood at the counter, watching her without speaking. Her presence was subtle, as though she had always belonged in the room, but there was something new about her stillness. No bags, just herself, just sincerity. Joanne didn't speak either. She didn't need to. She continued with her task, flipping the eggs, stirring the coffee, setting 2 mugs on the table. The air between them was thick with unspoken things. Years of distance, years of silence. But it wasn't uncomfortable. Not anymore. When Joanne set the last plate down in front of Olivia, the silence broke. Olivia's eyes shimmered with tears, though she didn't make a sound. Her hands shook slightly as she reached for the fork, the weight of the moment pressing down on her. Joanne watched her, her heart heavy with a tenderness she hadn't expected. Olivia's voice came, soft and thick with emotion. "I didn't know how bad it was. I'm sorry." Joanne's hand rested lightly on the edge of the counter. She didn't rush to comfort her. She didn't need to. The words weren't for Joanne to absorb, but for Olivia to release. For the first time, there was no mask, no hesitation in Olivia's eyes. Joanne's response came quietly, without effort. "You weren't supposed to protect me, but you see me now." Olivia blinked rapidly, the tears falling without protest. It was the apology Joanne had longed to hear, but never expected to receive. And it was enough. She didn't need any more words. They had already spoken enough. Olivia's presence, her honesty, her recognition of Joanne's strength. It was all that was needed now. Later, Esther joined them in the kitchen. She seemed almost to know what was coming, as though she had been waiting for the moment when things would shift for Olivia. She moved quietly, methodically, as she often did, but today her actions had a different air about them, a quiet knowing that this was the beginning of something new. Together, they helped Olivia open a savings account, one that was hers alone. No shared names, no shared obligations. Just Olivia, her own path, separate from the past she had inherited. It wasn't much, a small practical gesture, but it was something. Something she could carry with her. When Tomas arrived later, it was with a quiet eagerness to teach Olivia something, anything. His hands guided her through the simple process of installing curtain rods, his patience endless as he showed her how to measure and adjust, the small movements of instruction punctuated by light laughter. Joanne watched them from the doorway, the sight of them working together filling her with an unexpected warmth. Tomas had always been steady, a quiet presence, but today his energy felt like the sun breaking through clouds. And as they laughed, something deep inside Joanne unlocked, not from relief, but from understanding. She wasn't alone anymore. She wasn't waiting. The afternoon stretched on, the house full of small tasks and easy conversation. And then, without warning, Olivia picked up her phone, snapped a picture of herself and Joanne standing together on the beach, the vast sky stretching above them. It was simple. No caption, no explanation, just them. Just this moment. Joanne watched as Olivia posted it, her gaze soft but filled with a quiet certainty. It wasn't a proclamation. It wasn't a message for the world to see. It was just an image of the now, of who they were together. The photo, with its unspoken caption, said everything. And as the evening drew close, Joanne sat back and watched the waves crash against the shore. Her life had shifted. The weight of the past had been left behind, carried away by the tides. What mattered now was this: the warmth, the laughter, and the quiet bond that was finally, fully hers. She was no longer waiting for an invitation, no longer longing for a seat at a table that had never truly been hers. The world had a way of moving forward, and for the first time in a long time, Joanne knew she was exactly where she was meant to be. And when the day came, when they came, she would be ready. But for now, she didn't need them. She had everything she needed right here. The front door slammed shut, the sound sharp against the stillness of the beach house. Joanne didn't flinch. She wasn't waiting anymore. She had built something that no longer relied on their attention, their approval. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, but she didn't check it. There had been an unease in her chest for a few days now, an unspoken tension that had settled in ever since she had seen Claire's name flash across her screen, only to be ignored. But today, it was different. Today, she was ready to face the next layer of the fallout from her choice. She moved across the living room, pacing slowly in the warm glow of the late afternoon light. The house was quieter now, empty except for her and the unspoken space she had carved out, one piece at a time. A soft knock on the door interrupted her thoughts. She paused. David and Claire were back. The holidays, with their impeccable timing, had come to an end. She wasn't sure why their return still held weight for her, but it did. The ripple of their absence, followed by their inevitable attempt to return, always stung. The door creaked open, and there, standing in the entryway, was Claire, holding a stack of holiday cards, her face tight with purpose. Joanne felt an odd, almost detached calm wash over her. "I'm returning these," Claire said, her tone clipped but measured. She handed the stack of cards to Joanne, the paper edges sharp against her fingers. "We didn't think you'd care to get them." Joanne's gaze flickered over the cards, crisp, carefully curated holiday greetings with their perfect family photos, their smiling faces, their empty spaces. With one smooth motion, Joanne set the cards aside. She didn't need to read them. She had already received her message. Claire turned to leave without saying anything more. But before she stepped out, her phone buzzed. She glanced down at it, her face hardening. "I'm not sure you understand," she muttered, more to herself than to Joanne. Joanne didn't respond. Instead, she moved quietly to the side, giving Claire space to go. She watched her leave, the door clicking shut behind her. As the silence returned to the house, Joanne's fingers instinctively brushed her phone. The notifications piled up. Claire had posted again. A quote about forgiveness being strength appeared in the feed, as if to justify everything Joanne had done. Forgiveness. Strength. The words were hollow, sterile. Claire's comment section had been disabled. Another subtle way of making sure no one would call her bluff. Joanne didn't react. She had already learned not to expect anything from Claire anymore. She opened her email instead. Another message from David had come through. "We didn't think you cared about the holidays." The words echoed in her mind, and for a moment, she felt the familiar sting of exclusion, like a memory resurfacing just when she thought it was forgotten. She'd spent so many years wondering why they hadn't seen her, why they hadn't reached out. But the answer was clear now. They never had. They never would. Joanne closed her eyes for a moment, feeling the weight of their words sink in. But she didn't feel anger. She didn't feel bitterness. She felt peace. Her phone buzzed again, this time with a notification from a women's mental health nonprofit. They had shared Olivia's photo, the one from the beach, as a symbol of reclaiming joy. Joanne smiled softly. The image, so simple, had become something bigger, something more. It was a story of strength, not just her own, but Olivia's too. A quiet rebellion, a declaration of their own choice. Joanne scrolled down to another notification, a local news feature. Her picture appeared in the paper, the headline reading, "From Silence to Sanctuary." She paused for a moment, taking in the words. It was true. This house, this life, had been a sanctuary. And she had built it herself. No help, no apologies. It was hers. The doorbell rang again, and this time it was Esther, stepping inside with a knowing smile. She didn't need to ask if Joanne had seen the latest developments. She just handed over a letter. The words on the page were clipped, sterile, Claire's signature at the bottom. "Are you punishing us?" The email read. Joanne opened her mouth to speak, but nothing came out at first. She let the weight of the question settle, the hurt that had been there for so long. And then she finally answered, her voice steady, clear. "No. I'm protecting peace." Esther's lips twitched into a smile, understanding more than anyone else. No explanation was necessary. It was the truth. As the evening stretched into night, Joanne stood at the window, looking out at the vastness of the ocean before her. She was no longer waiting for them to understand, to apologize, or to validate her. She had already created something far more powerful than any invitation or recognition could ever offer. The past was behind her, and no matter how many times they tried to knock on her door, Joanne knew she would never be drawn back into their world. She had a new one now, one where she no longer needed their approval, where her peace spoke louder than their silence. And as the house settled into stillness, Joanne let herself breathe, fully and deeply, for the first time in years. The soft scent of ocean air mingled with the heady fragrance of Joanne's morning coffee, drifting through the open windows of the beach house. The sound of waves crashing against the shore was steady, grounding, like the pulse of a world that had no regard for the small, petty battles of the past. Joanne stood by the window, the light filtering through the glass, casting long shadows across the room. The house, now fully realized in its shape and form, felt like a living thing. It had become her sanctuary, a place where she had reclaimed everything they had taken from her: her space, her voice, her peace. Today, she was finalizing the last pieces, the last ties to a past she had long ago let go of. Joanne moved into the kitchen, her hands steady as she filled out the forms. The acts of generosity and power as simple as her morning ritual. She was donating $50,000 to the Coastal Art Education Center, a place she had found during her first trip to the beach house. It was more than a charity. It was a symbol, a dedication to every forgotten matriarch, every woman who had stood in silence, overlooked and unacknowledged. The donation wasn't for her. It was for the future, for the women who would rise from the shadows where she once stood. She signed the check with a calm precision, then turned to the next task. A scholarship. A named scholarship for first-generation girls. It felt like breathing life back into a space that had once been empty. Every one of these girls would have access to a future they'd otherwise be excluded from. She wasn't just leaving a legacy, she was creating one. Olivia came into the room, her presence soft but constant. She had become more than a granddaughter. She had become an anchor, a partner in Joanne's new life. She watched quietly as Joanne finalized the details. "Are you sure about this?" Olivia asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Joanne smiled, her eyes softening as she glanced up at the young woman who had quietly shifted her place in Joanne's heart. "More sure than I've ever been," she said. "You'll be co-signing the trust with Esther. When the time comes, you'll be the one making decisions about my estate and medical rights. This is for you." Olivia nodded. The weight of it was not lost on her, but she knew what it meant. This wasn't just a financial arrangement. This was trust. This was partnership. The legacy Joanne was leaving behind wasn't just money. It was the power to protect, to care, to make decisions that would shape the future. Later, Joanne turned to Esther, who had been quietly finalizing the trust documents. She handed Esther the finalized papers, her voice steady. "David's name needs to come off everything. No access, no rights." Esther didn't flinch. Done. She was already moving to the next task, managing the logistics of removing David from all directives. No more discussion, no more second thoughts. The peace Joanne had fought for wasn't just in her own hands now. It was woven through every choice she made, every signature she signed. And then came the final step, the one she had long since prepared herself for. Claire tried to appeal, of course. The lawyer's letter arrived with an urgency that could be felt even through the sterile legalese. But it was all in vain. Pastor Boone had replied. The words on the letter were a simple dismissal. "You're not on file." Joanne sat back, her breath coming a little easier now. It was a final closing of a chapter that had stretched on far too long. The letter in front of her was her final response to everything they had tried to take from her. She picked up the pen, her hand firm as she wrote her final letter, not for them, but for herself. The words were small, simple, and they meant everything. Legacy is lived, not claimed. The ink dried on the paper as she sat there, staring at it for a long moment. The past had no place in her life anymore. It was time to live her legacy, one that had been shaped not by the hands of those who abandoned her, but by the choices she had made to stand firm, to create something of her own. The life she had built with people who had chosen her, that was her legacy, not theirs. Her phone buzzed again, a text from David. "I get it now." She stared at the words, the apology, the recognition. It was too little, too late. The finality of it settled in. Joanne didn't feel satisfaction, relief, or even anger. She felt nothing. Nothing but peace. And for the first time, it was enough. She set her phone down without replying, letting the words dissipate like smoke in the wind. She didn't need an answer, not anymore. She was done explaining herself. The day stretched on, the light dimming as evening approached. Joanne closed her eyes for a moment, letting the stillness of the house wash over her. It was time. Time to let go of the past. Time to live her life. And when the world knocked again, as it inevitably would, she would not open the door. This house, this life, it was all she needed. The soft glow of the morning sun filtered through the large windows of the beach house, casting warm light across the table Joanne had meticulously set for New Year's brunch. The dining room, once empty and full of unspoken history, now felt alive with the laughter and quiet energy of those who had chosen to be there. The scent of freshly baked croissants, roasted coffee, and sizzling bacon mingled with the salty sea air, creating an atmosphere of warmth and possibility. Tomas, in his usual understated way, had put on some soft music. The gentle melody of a jazz piano floated through the house, filling the spaces that had once felt too quiet. Esther moved gracefully around the kitchen, pouring mimosas into delicate glasses, the bubbles rising in a steady stream. She was a calming presence, as always, the steady hand that guided them through their shared history, both the difficult and the beautiful. At the table, Olivia sat between two of Joanne's former students, a local artist and a neighbor who had been widowed the year before. Laughter bubbled up from the table, easy and free. There was no need for forced pleasantries, no uncomfortable silences. This was what Joanne had built, a family of choice. A family that understood her without needing to ask, without needing to apologize for past mistakes. Joanne stood at the head of the table, taking in the scene before her. Her gaze lingered on the faces of those gathered, and a soft smile tugged at her lips. There was a sense of peace now, a sense of completion. The space she had created, the life she had crafted felt solid, rooted in something real, not in the expectations of a family who had left her behind, but in the people who had chosen to stay. The toast came just as the meal was winding down, glasses raised in quiet solidarity. Tomas was the first to speak, his voice steady, rich with the kind of quiet wisdom that only comes with years of living. "To quiet exits," he said, his gaze flickering to Joanne, "and louder returns." The words hung in the air, and for a moment, the room was still. It wasn't just a toast to the year ahead, but a nod to everything they had all left behind to come together here. To the lives they had walked away from, to the lives they had built in their place. Joanne held her glass high, her heart full. "Here's to finding our own way," she said softly, her voice carrying the weight of her truth. "And to never needing an invitation again." The room erupted in quiet applause, the sound of clinking glasses filling the air. Joanne looked down at the table, at the place cards she had set for everyone. There was one, however, that was empty. Her fingers brushed against the card, leaving it deliberately blank. It wasn't for absence. It wasn't for anyone who hadn't shown up. It was for closure. Her hand lingered on the card, and she thought for a moment about the people who had never really seen her. Claire, David. The years spent waiting for something that would never come. The place card was a symbol of everything she had let go of and everything she had chosen to create in its place. Just then, a knock at the door. A reporter from Modern Coastal Living had arrived, camera in hand. She was a woman Joanne had never met, but her presence felt almost predestined, as if this moment had been waiting to unfold. The reporter took a few pictures, asking questions, documenting the way the house had been transformed. And in that moment, Joanne realized. This was it. This was her story now. The story of a woman who had reclaimed herself, who had rebuilt a life with intention and with grace. The article would be a quiet acknowledgement, not just of the house, but of the woman Joanne had become. Later, after the reporter had left, Joanne sat back, a small, satisfied smile playing on her lips as she glanced at the screen of her phone. A new notification. Claire had left a comment under the article, something passive-aggressive, a slight wrapped in civility. Interesting use of inheritance. Joanne stared at the words, but they didn't sting. They weren't even a surprise. She had long known that Claire's attempts to control, to manipulate, would continue, even from afar. But it didn't matter anymore. The comment was deleted within the hour, as expected. Claire had no power here, no more place in Joanne's life. Joanne didn't feel anger. She didn't even feel satisfaction. She felt something else entirely, something soft, something full. She put the phone down, her gaze returning to the room, to the people around the table. They didn't need an explanation. They didn't need a comment. What they had built here was stronger than any empty words Claire could throw at them. As the laughter resumed, Joanne closed her eyes for just a moment, letting the sound wash over her. This was where she belonged. Not in the past, not in the shadows of people who didn't see her, but here, in this light, surrounded by the family she had chosen, the life she had built. And when the past tried to knock again, she would be ready. But for now, she was exactly where she was meant to be. Joanne sat at the kitchen table, a stack of paperwork in front of her, the weight of her decisions settling into the calm of the room. The sun filtered through the open windows, casting a soft golden glow on the beach outside. Her fingers moved deliberately across the papers, signing forms, reviewing contracts, each action a small but meaningful gesture of reclaiming her life, her legacy. She'd already made her mark with the donation and scholarship, but today felt different. Today was about something far more personal, something she'd never thought she'd need, something that belonged to her and her alone. Her name. Her pen hovered for a moment before she signed the trademark application. Kessler, her family name, once tarnished by absence and expectation, would now be used for something greater than its former associations. She had officially trademarked it for her foundation, ensuring that no one else could cash in on her legacy. The idea of Claire, David, or anyone else trying to claim the name, trying to use it for profit or publicity, felt laughable. This was her name now, and it would remain hers, untarnished and untouchable. Tomas came into the room, a quiet presence, as always. He smiled when he saw her working, knowing that each task, no matter how small, was part of something larger. Today, it wasn't just about paperwork or legal matters. It was about putting the final touches on the life she had built. "I think it's time we finish the bookshelf," he said, his voice as calm and certain as ever. Joanne glanced up, her heart swelling. Tomas had built many things for the house, but this was special. Each shelf was meant to hold a year. Each one named for the years she had been left out. The years spent waiting for a family who couldn't see her, who couldn't acknowledge her worth. Now, they would stand in the corner of her living room, strong and proud, the shelves filled with books and mementos from the life she had finally claimed. Tomas set to work, hammering nails into the wall, placing each shelf with the same care he had always shown in every task. Joanne stood back, watching as the bookshelf took shape. It was a quiet act of defiance, of closure. Each year represented something lost, but also something gained. The more she built, the more she let go of what had never been hers to hold. Later, Olivia joined them, carrying a small plaque she had made for the mantel. It was simple, just a wooden sign with one phrase, "Christmas lives here, permanently." Joanne watched as Olivia placed the plaque on the shelf Tomas had just finished. The act was small, but profound. It was their tradition now, their declaration of the family they had built, A family that didn't need an invitation, didn't need approval from anyone else. This was their space, and they had every right to claim it. As the evening settled, Joanne moved to the next step in her plan, her memoir. She'd spent months working on it, piecing together her story, the one that hadn't been told, the one she had been too afraid to write. 3 years, Then Me was the title. A simple, honest reflection of the time it took to realize she had been waiting for people who weren't coming, for recognition that would never come. The book wasn't a vendetta. It wasn't even a cathartic release. It was a testament to her own resilience, her own strength. It was the story of a woman who had learned to build something more than just a life. She had built a future, a legacy. When the final draft was complete, Joanne felt a deep sense of closure. She printed the first copy, sliding it into an envelope with a handwritten note on the outside. To the one who built her life. From the one who chose to live it. Later that evening, she stood at her mailbox, waiting for the delivery. When it came, she held the first signed copy in her hands. The feel of the paper was a reminder of the journey. It wasn't just a book. It was proof that she had done something extraordinary. It was her story, and no one else would ever be able to rewrite it. As the light faded from the sky, Joanne stood in the quiet of her house, holding the book in her hands. The house, the family, the life. Everything was as it should be. And though she knew the world outside would keep moving, keep trying to pull her back into the past, she knew now she could never go back. She set the book down on the kitchen counter, her gaze lingering on it. It was everything. It was her victory. The final words she would ever need to write. And then her phone buzzed again. A text from David. "I get it now." Joanne didn't open the message. Instead, she turned her attention back to the house, to the people inside it, to the future she was building. She had spent far too long waiting for them to see her. She didn't need their validation anymore. The world had changed. She had changed. And now, she was free. The past was no longer a weight. It was just another chapter, one she had closed for good. Revenge story writer said. The glow of firelight flickered in the living room, casting shadows that danced across the walls of the beach house. The smell of pine and cinnamon filled the air as Joanne stood by the window, watching the first few snowflakes settle gently on the deck outside. It was December, and this year she was hosting a pre-Christmas open house. Not for family, not for anyone who would come out of obligation, but for the people she had carefully chosen to share her life with. The local choir had gathered near the hearth, their voices rising in harmony as they sang old carols, their melodies weaving through the house like a thread connecting past and present. The music was soft, joyful, a stark contrast to the silence that had often filled this place when it had been empty. It was now alive, brimming with laughter and warmth. Joanne's fingers brushed against the glass of the wine glass in her hand, and she smiled as she turned her attention to the guests sitting around the table. Former students, local artists, the neighbor who had brought the homemade bread for every holiday, the widow who had found solace in their shared moments of quiet. They were all here, and no one was asking questions about her family. They already knew. A guest, a young woman who had worked with Joanne years ago, leaned forward with a hesitant smile. "Where's your family?" she asked, her voice gentle, as if she were expecting to hear an explanation Joanne had given 1,000 times. Joanne didn't miss a beat. She glanced around the room, taking in the faces of the people who had become her family, the ones who had chosen her, the ones who had come back, the ones who saw her without needing her to explain. Her answer was simple. "You're looking at them." The words hung in the air for a moment, and the room fell quiet, the weight of her statement settling in. There was no need for further explanation. They knew. They saw. Later, just as the conversation had resumed, Joanne's phone buzzed. She glanced at it, not surprised to see Claire's name flashing across the screen. She'd known this was coming. Claire always had a way of inserting herself back into the story, whether invited or not. Joanne didn't even bother to open the text. She knew it would be the same thing. Can I RSVP? The thought of Claire trying to be a part of this moment was almost laughable now. Joanne set the phone down, sliding it face down on the counter. But there was a second message waiting for her, this time from David. His words were blunt, like a punch that had been thrown a long time ago, but only just landed. Olivia, you're abandoning us. Joanne exhaled sharply, her hand tightening around the edge of her wineglass. She could already hear Olivia's voice in her mind, soft yet firm, the way she had learned to speak her truth. She knew Olivia wouldn't let herself be dragged back into the old roles, the ones that had been imposed on her. Sure enough, a message from Olivia popped up moments later. You went first. Joanne read the message slowly, savoring the words, feeling the quiet strength in them. It wasn't about abandoning anyone. It was about choosing to no longer be a part of a family that never saw her, never truly saw her. And now, Olivia had chosen to follow in her own footsteps. Esther, who had been watching Joanne with knowing eyes, raised her glass with a small, approving smile. To everyone who learned how to stop asking for a seat, she said, her voice clear and strong, a toast that resonated with more than just words. It was a toast to those who had decided, at long last, to stop waiting for permission. The room echoed with soft laughter and clinking glasses as the toast was repeated, a gesture of quiet solidarity. There were no more questions, no more attempts to rewrite their history. This moment was theirs. Just then, a neighbor knocked on the door, a mischievous grin on his face as he held up a small sign. Thought it was time, he said, before slipping away again, leaving the sign hanging on Joanne's door. It read, Queen of Christmas. Joanne looked at it, the weight of the words settling on her like a crown. It wasn't a title she had ever expected, but it felt right. She had built something here, and no one could take it from her. This house, this life, had been carved out with intention, with care. It had been created by hands that had once been broken and were now whole again. As the night stretched on, Joanne stood by the window once more, looking out at the snow falling gently over the beach. It was beautiful. It was quiet. And for the first time in so many years, she didn't feel like she was missing anything. She didn't need to look back at the family who had never invited her in. She was home. And as she watched the world outside, she knew that even if they came knocking again, this time, she wouldn't be answering. Her future was already here, and it had never been clearer. Joanne stood in the quiet of the beach house, the sounds of the waves crashing softly against the shore blending with the warmth of the crackling fire. She'd planned this moment for so long, knowing the time would come when she would leave behind the weight of past hurts, the memories of years spent waiting for invitations that never came. It was nearly Christmas, but this year there would be no expectations, no demands. Only her, and the family she had carefully chosen. The house was exactly what she had hoped for, a space built with intention, a place that belonged to her and to those who had chosen to be a part of her life. There were no more uninvited guests, no more empty chairs at the table. Every piece of the house had been constructed with care, every corner filled with meaning, every detail a reminder of how far she had come. Joanne set up her phone, propping it against the mantel of the fireplace. She adjusted the angle until she could see the soft light of the fire and the twinkling of the Christmas tree behind her. Then, with a steady breath, she began recording. There was no script, no rehearsed lines. This wasn't for anyone else. It was for her, for the future. A message to the people who would someday find her story, to the ones who needed to hear it. She smiled softly into the camera, her eyes bright with clarity, no guilt, no regret. For those who didn't think I'd find my way, I'm here. For those who never saw me, I see myself now. She paused, her voice calm but firm. This house, this life, it's mine, no one else's. Joanne ended the video with a quiet look at the fire, her face calm. She hit stop and sat there for a moment, letting the warmth of the room fill her. This was her legacy. No need for apologies or explanations. She had built this for herself, from the ground up, piece by piece. Later that evening, Olivia entered the room, carrying the last of the holiday decorations. She set the table with the same care she'd always shown, each plate placed with intention, every glass sparkling in the light of the fire. The table was set perfectly, and yet, the most meaningful thing wasn't the silverware or the decorations. It was the love that filled the room. Every item on the table was handmade, crafted with care. Nothing had been bought or inherited. It had all been earned. Tomas entered next, holding a small box wrapped in simple paper. He handed it to Joanne with a small, knowing smile, his eyes warm and quiet as he spoke. A gift. Something to remember. Joanne opened it slowly, revealing a pendant shaped like a snowflake. It was delicate, one of a kind, just like the life she had built. She held it up to the firelight, watching it catch the glow. The pendant was a reflection of everything she had worked for, everything she had claimed. She put it around her neck, her fingers brushing the cold metal. "Thank you," she whispered to Tomas. He didn't need to say anything. His gift, like everything else he did, spoke volumes without a single word. As evening deepened, Joanne moved to the large windows that overlooked the beach, the salt air rushing in as she stepped onto the porch. The sky was darker now, but the soft glow of the house made everything feel warm and alive. She held a glass of cider in her hand, taking a slow sip. The taste was sweet, comforting, a reminder of everything she had built. She watched the waves crash against the shore, the tide pushing relentlessly forward, just like her. The water, a constant reminder of how far she'd come, how much she had learned to let go of. Everything that had once felt so heavy now felt light, like it was no longer hers to carry. As the sound of the waves filled her senses, Joanne caught sight of a small package on the porch, sitting quietly in the corner. She moved toward it, her heart skipping a beat when she saw the return address. It was from David, the last link to a past she'd let go of, a gesture that came too late. Joanne didn't hesitate. She bent down, picked it up, and held it in her hand for only a moment. The package was unimportant now. She wasn't waiting for answers. She wasn't waiting for apologies. Her legacy was already built, her future already secured. Without a word, she stepped back to the edge of the porch, holding the package in her hand. The tide was rolling in, the water cool and relentless. She held the package out, letting it drift from her fingertips, watching as the waves took it. There was no turning back. For 3 Christmases, my family left me out, so I bought the only house they'll never be welcome in. Joanne turned away from the water, a smile on her lips, and walked back into the house, where the laughter and warmth of the life she had built awaited her. It was finally time to move forward, and this time, no one could take it away.